This is my last update video before I actually complete Hyrox. A lot of things have happened in this last week and I'm going to update you on where exactly I am in my training phase. But first I'm going to talk through some of the things that have been going on in my head since moving away from CrossFit and more towards Hyrox. Every time I post a video like this, I get a load of backlash, which I think is frankly ridiculous. And that's because the backlash is based on people saying, oh, if you're not doing CrossFit, then just shut up about it. CrossFit has been a big part of my life for the last 9 years, so I'm allowed to talk about it. And I'm allowed to continue to talk about it. The more I do it, the more I transition away from it, whether it comes back into my training routine or leaves it again, because I love CrossFit and have loved it for a very long time, but I've just realised it's not the complete program for me anymore, and that is okay. It's so funny because if I was doing F45 or Orange Theory or just general strength training and talking about how I'm transitioning away from it, no one would have a problem with it, but because it's CrossFit, everybody loses their minds.
Then everyone loses their minds.
So earlier on in this training block, I was doing 1 CrossFit session a week and a lot of Hyrox stuff outside of that, alongside 3 runs a week, because running is my major weakness and that's the thing that I need to do the most of. And it's noticeable that I'm getting so much worse at CrossFit, but that is the intention, because Hyrox and CrossFit are so different, and Hyrox requires a much longer duration, steadier state kind of workout, because the event that I'm going to be doing is going to take me between 1 to 3 hours. I really don't know how long it's going to take me, but we will see in a couple of weeks. But this means a substantial amount of my training has been 45 minutes plus. But every time I go back to a CrossFit class and do a workout that's between like 7 minutes, I remember I had this workout that was 7 minutes a couple of weeks ago and it absolutely destroyed me. And that is not necessarily the sign of a good workout, that's just the sign that your body is feeling really taxed. And then literally the day after, I went into the gym and did a Hyrox session with a lot of running in it, and it was over an hour long, and I not only felt better, I felt fresh. I came home and like it was clear that I'd exerted energy. I had that like burn lung feeling, and for the majority of the workout I was in about zone 3, so it was like moderate work, and I came home and I just felt fine to carry on with my day. Whereas when I go to CrossFit, I just feel so burnt out, so tired, and just like I need a nap. And I also found that I was coming back from CrossFit like so hungry, and I feel that high intensity seems to be doing that to my body lately. The lower intensity stuff doesn't. In fact, the lower intensity stuff makes me feel less hungry, which is interesting. I've noticed that my body likes to default to the anaerobic zone 4, zone 5, like going hard in training. My body knows how to do that, therefore it tries to get into that space in order to complete workouts. And I've been trying to build a more aerobic base, so I've been doing zone 2, zone 3 and trying to stay as much as possible out of that zone 4, apart from like specific sessions during the week, because having done CrossFit for so long, which is predominantly zone 4 and zone 5, I have really lacked that aerobic base. But it's so clear now that it is building, because I'm finding longer, steadier state workouts so much easier, like measurably so much easier. And the paces of my runs, I've literally been knocking like 10 to 20 seconds off my pace most weeks. I finally ran my 5k that got cancelled. It was in December at the end of when I'd done Couch to 5k. It got cancelled because of the storms and was postponed until the 4th of January, which I ran. I enjoyed it, but it was like really slippy. Just, I think I would run a road race next time rather than around a track and then a random field. But I got a medal to add to my collection. And I definitely want to do more running. I feel like maybe there will be a 10k in the future at some point. I'm enjoying running. One thing I've really noticed lately is a lot of the CrossFit space seem to be questioning the CrossFit methodology and also talking a bit more about Hyrox. And the comparison of the two is going to happen because the general public literally think that Hyrox and CrossFit are the exact same thing. They don't see any difference.
You see, Hyrox combines functional strength with cardiovascular training. In CrossFit, it does the same thing. So these are very different, super different. These two sports, different, most different. These are probably the most 2 different things you could have. I just can't get into the differences right now because, but they're different. Oh yeah, and Hyrox is good, CrossFit is bad. We don't necessarily know why, but we do know that Hyrox is much better than CrossFit. Yeah, so just no good, bad, really bad, really, really good.
Obviously, CrossFitters think Hyrox is completely different and Hyrox people think CrossFit is completely different. One thing that needs to stop is CrossFitters saying that Hyrox is boring. It's okay if it's boring for you, but that doesn't mean it's boring for everyone else. A lot of us can do stuff like triathlons and never get bored just doing the same 3 movements over and over and over again. Hyrox is actually quite varied when you compare it to other things. And I was listening to the Rocks Life podcast the other day, and that's what they were saying, is how varied Hyrox training is. I think she's called Sinead, the woman that just broke the Hyrox Open record, and coming from a running background, she sees Hyrox as like really varied and really fun. Different things for different people. If you think Hyrox is boring, don't do it, but don't say it's boring for everybody else, because clearly it's not. Clearly people are loving it. And then I also listened to this podcast, I think he was on Jason Khalipa's podcast with Matt Chan, and it was so interesting. He was talking about CrossFit having an aerobic deficiency. Basically, CrossFit is an incomplete program, and CrossFit doesn't expose that aerobic base building.
With my definition and CrossFit's definition of CrossFit, created an aerobic deficiency that I could not overcome. It became wholly obvious to me when I participated in an endurance event and I went beyond my aerobic threshold for a long period of time. And then my body just said, click into that anaerobic area that you're good at. So I would have to go and then stop, go and then stop, go and then stop until I could recover. And it was this huge hole in my fitness that I never realized was there because CrossFit programming doesn't expose it.
And this is one of the reasons you see the CrossFitters that are entering Hyrox races doing doubles, because that's more anaerobic. He literally warns us of the consequences of only doing CrossFit and says to fit in some aerobic stuff in there. Otherwise your body, like mine has done, will just default to that anaerobic way of training because that's what it knows, that's what it's good at, especially if you've done it for a really long time.
I think people need to be aware of the consequences of training anaerobically only, and or for 90% of what you do. That understanding of like, okay, if I train like this for a long period of time, my body is going to bias creating energy through anaerobic glycolysis. And what that means is when you train that longer and longer, your body becomes more efficient at that and it loses capacity in aerobic activities. And you just need to match that up with your priorities. So where do I want to be at the end of my career? Do I want to be doing CrossFit in a gym, or do I want to be going on, these long adventures with my wife Cherie or friends? Do I want to go on these long hunts with a heavy pack and be able to sustain that for a long period of time? And when I match that up, CrossFit's definition that includes high intensity, which means power output, does not match up with my priorities. So I've had to add in 2 to 3 days a week of aerobic training specifically.
And if you read like Peter Attia's book Outlive or the Huberman podcast, listen to that, anything that's on longevity at the moment, it's so important to have some zone 2, zone 3, some aerobic work in there just to live longer. What I found great about what Matt Chan was saying is he encouraged everybody to train for something that suits their goals right now. And that's something that I've done a lot with my training. The reason I'm doing all of this, doing more aerobic work, being able to run or go out for a long hike or do something at a sustained, steadier effort fits more with what I want my life to be like. I have no real need for short anaerobic bursts of lifting heavy weights and going really fast and doing gymnastics movements. But what I do want to be able to do is go for a long hike carrying my daughter on my back and walking up a load of hills, which is a long aerobic kind of workout. In the summer, I want to be able to get my paddleboard out and go out paddleboarding. I want to be able to go on a long open water swim. More Hyrox style training fits that because it's aerobic, whereas CrossFit, because it's so anaerobic, does not fit that unless I want to do like interval sprints on a paddleboard or swimming, which I don't want to do. I want to do a long steady swim because A, that's what I want, and B, it's what feels good on my body right now, especially being 33. I am 33. My birthday was in December. Scary stuff. But as I get older, I feel like my body just wants to do more steadier stuff. And we should always just go with what our body is telling us that we need to be doing. If we're feeling exhausted and tired, like Matt Chan was saying, after doing loads of CrossFit workouts, then maybe lowering the intensity and getting in more active minutes will be better. And on the active minutes, before, when I was just doing CrossFit, I was getting below the recommended 150 active minutes of cardio, and I wasn't even getting the 75 intense minutes. But now I'm doing over 240 active minutes a week, and that is all cardio. That's like working time. And sure, if you log a CrossFit workout as an hour, it will show different heart rate zones, like zone 2, zone 3, probably when you're putting the weights back or just wandering around, and your active minutes will be a lot higher. But if you track the actual time you're doing cardio, you probably won't meet the recommended amount. Moving around putting the weights back does not count as true zone 2 and zone 3 cardio. That's not going to build you an aerobic base. That needs to be like running, rowing, on a machine, doing some form of cardio in a steady state for a longer period of time, for like 30 minutes plus. Basically, Matt Chan was saying that CrossFit on its own is an incomplete program, which I do agree with now. But definitely have a watch of the whole podcast. I highly recommend it. It was a really interesting insight from a previous CrossFit athlete. So when I get into something new, I tend to hyperfixate on that subject, and I've been reading quite a lot. Got the 80-20 rule, which is about running, and basically 80% are lower intensity is supposed to get you better at running. The hybrid method, which is quite interesting, but it isn't a book that I loved. It seemed quite basic, but it was good to actually read a book about training in a hybrid style. Obviously, I've been reading a lot about heart rate zones, and it's basic things that I knew before. I did an A level in PE, and then I've also got a PT qualification as well, so I know all of this, but I'm just kind of updating my knowledge. And then I've been brushing up on basic sports science. This is because I feel a little bit like I was indoctrinated by the whole CrossFit methodology, and that is the best way to train for everybody. And I've realised it's not true, and I think a lot of people have realised that it's not true lately. So this section of this book was really interesting. There's a pretty good visual explanation here as well, and it basically talks about how we shouldn't be training high intensity all the time. As per figure 5.5, this refers specifically to the third bars and HIIT types of training 2, 4, 5 and 6. Type 2 is HIIT and game based. Type 4 is HIIT short game based, so it's very, very similar to CrossFit. Type 5 again is anaerobic, and type 6 is neuromuscular only, so I'm presuming that's just strength training. Yeah, speed and strength. Types 2, 4, 5 and 6, you might be able to imagine how this would likely result in a train wreck for most individuals. Usually we need a substantial period of rest days between such sessions to allow the neuromuscular musculoskeletal system to adapt appropriately. There's a whole section on different types of intensities of training and the interference effect, and training strength and HIIT types of training at the same time. It's really interesting to read, but basically we need varied types of training in order to progress and not to massively overtrain. Something I didn't realise either, but it was posted recently on Instagram somewhere. I think it's an account that's speaking out against CrossFit. And they pointed out that neither Dave or Greg have any sort of formal education in sports science. Or I'm not even sure they have PT qualifications. I don't know what they have.
And the emissaries from HQ are interesting in that none had extensive training experience, none have any strength and conditioning education outside of CrossFit, and are largely incapable of articulating any nuanced methodology in strength and conditioning.
Wow.
And none have a background in anatomy, physiology, or exercise science. In fact, Greg Glassman never had a formal education in this material, but has formidable self-taught knowledge.
They don't have a formal education in it. And that's not unusual. Like 33% of the population have a degree or above. And I honestly thought it was more than that. And I just assumed that they maybe had some qualifications, but it turns out they don't. So it might be that this methodology is based on anecdotal evidence. For me anyway, I've realised there's no reason to be so stuck to one methodology when there is lots of science out there telling us that different ways of training and incorporating more aerobic ways of training is better for you for longevity and just fitness all round. And I also want to address this. This lady said, but I don't understand how you always had zone 4 and zone 5 workouts. Was the programming bad? Was there no scaling to hit the intended stimulus? Because I can't imagine any good coach was program zone 4 and zone 5 workouts. This isn't one coach. I've been to over 9 CrossFit gyms, some of the organisations that program for lots of different gyms. It's also in Fitness in 100 Words. It literally says it right there. The average CrossFit workout is less than 15 minutes, and if you're doing 15 minutes of zone 3, you're likely not going to see substantial fitness gains from that because that's too short. If you've ever been in a CrossFit gym, the coaches and everybody around you encourages you to push hard. If you're doing a long 30-minute plus workout, like say Murph, that isn't steady state cardio, that's more like muscular endurance. You're more limited by the capacity of your muscles. You're breaking up those push-ups, you're breaking up those pull-ups. It's not steady state cardio. And if you still don't believe me, ChatGPT says CrossFit primarily targets heart rate zone 4, anaerobic threshold 80 to 90% of heart rate max, and 5, which is 90 to 100%. Due to its high intensity, short duration workouts, these zones emphasize anaerobic energy systems, driving glycogen usage and pushing the body to near maximal effort. When some longer CrossFit workouts like Murph might seem aerobic, they're better classified as strength endurance workouts with fluctuating heart rate rather than steady state cardio. True zone 2 and zone 3 aerobic training is rarely achieved in CrossFit due to its stop-start nature and intensity spikes. But fact check me, do what you like. If you like CrossFit and you like going high intensity all the time, that is okay. Me doing more steady state stuff is a personal choice and it's what I want to do. It doesn't mean that you have to do what I'm doing. But other CrossFitters are speaking out about doing lower intensity stuff. And this post from Amanda Barnhart was really interesting. She says every time she does high intensity lately, she feels terrible for the rest of the day. And this is exactly how I was feeling. She also says how doing more low intensity stuff is making her feel energized, which is definitely how I feel. And underneath there was so many comments agreeing with her, including this one, saying, is it our age, our busy schedules as mums? I stopped doing CrossFit after knee surgery and I've tried a few high intensity workouts and my body hates it. And Amanda replied, my guess is it's years of stress and high cortisol, but yes, mum schedules add to it. And this is definitely something that I've noticed, but I know that I have really high cortisol. I've got trauma and I'm a very stressed person and I have loads of signs of high cortisol. So adding to that with high intensity workouts is probably not a good idea. There was others saying they'd done it for 8 years, which is around the same time as I've done it, feeling beat up. Others saying that they're burnt out, too many Metcons. Others confirming that the high stress and cortisol levels have had an impact on them and that their mental health started to suffer. This one's interesting. I find that with high intensity and cortisol increased my weight and was only increasing no matter what I did. I have to go low intensity, lots of walking too, and then I got pregnant. Matt Chan also mentioned in that podcast that CrossFit makes you so hungry because of the depleted glycogen stores.
Negative, you end up in this negative feedback loop where, okay, if I do more of this, I'm going to lose a little bit of weight and I'm going to put on some muscle. But in reality, you end up overtrained and there's this high demand for carbs in your body because it's all anaerobic glycolysis that makes you put on body weight.
A lot of people find that they don't actually lose weight with CrossFit, so that could be part of it. And then we've had loads of people within the CrossFit space trying Hyrox lately. Training Think Tank did a podcast and they spoke about how it's really cool to have all of the data for Hyrox and being able to go back and redo the whole thing and make progress on those little data points. I personally love how trackable Hyrox is.
It can be confusing for a CrossFitter to understand, or at least like get a gauge on their progress year by year. And so to have more benchmarks in there where it might be a Hyrox event where you're showing them an endurance thing, or to just have that be one of the tests or an event inside of the year, I think is kind of encouraging and even maybe like reinforcing for the athlete and the coach both to be like, look, this is your evidence that you are getting better. This is pretty damn cool over the course of like 3 to 5 years.
And that's something that they really enjoyed as well. Within CrossFit, there's not a lot that you can track because even when you do the Open every single year, different people enter, the workouts are different. You don't actually know how much better or worse you did. For instance, I started to do a whole lot worse when they stopped doing max lifts in the Open and they reduced it down to 3 workouts. And that's not because I necessarily got less fit. It's because, although I did actually, it's because they got rid of a load of the weightlifting workouts. I probably would have done worse previously because I was doing so well on the weightlifting leaderboards. I think once I was like really up there. I can't remember what it was. But on all of the other workouts I was doing terribly, but I was just gaining loads of points from the weightlifting. And unless you're like doing Murph over and over again and comparing your score, there isn't a lot of measurability within CrossFit. But within Hyrox, you're doing the same thing and you can measure how fast you did each station. And then Tia Toomey also did Hyrox recently, and I found her comments really interesting. People were saying, I love Hyrox movements, simple, primal, effective, without all the circus tricks, which is clearly a bit of a dig at CrossFit for its gymnastics. I just love that as a spectator, I'm not anxious about athlete injuries. I also know how inclusive this is because it's fitness focused, not dependent on access to rigs, equipment, special movements. It looks, in a word, fun. That's really interesting that they've said it's fitness focused. So obviously they categorize fitness as more just being able to run and move stuff, not in the way that CrossFit classes it as being able to do weightlifting, gymnastics, and all of these crazy skills. She thinks that Hyrox is more fitness focused than CrossFit, which is a valid perspective. So I think the general feeling within the fitness space is that more people are opening their minds to Hyrox with the measurability of it, the opportunity to add in more aerobic training, and because it's something that seems a bit more inclusive for people, especially over 30, that are struggling with more of the high intensity stuff, mums that struggle to fit fitness in, like me, like Amanda Barnhart, and people in her comments. You just got to do what's right for you at the end of the day, and this is what's right for me. Let's get back to where I am in my Hyrox training journey. I am in my taper week, and this is the first time I have ever done a taper week. I've done over 40 CrossFit competitions in the 9 years that I've done CrossFit, and I've never tapered. I would rest from Wednesday onwards if I was doing a weekend competition, but that was it. And I'm looking more into the science of tapering and why it's a good thing to do, especially for more endurance-based events. And it's scary to me because I am a doer. I like to train hard, I like to push it, and I don't like to rest. Basically, resting for an extended period of time and reducing my volume before I rest is scary. But I'm doing it, and I definitely need to do it because I'm feeling so beat up. The last 6 weeks I've been doing 2 functional fitness sessions. To begin with, it was CrossFit, and then maybe 3 weeks into this 6 to 7 week cycle, I dropped CrossFit completely. I was like, I can't do this anymore. It's so hard on my body, and I feel like it's not getting me measurably better at the things that I need to be better at for Hyrox. So I dropped it. And then I started to have one of my Hyrox sessions in the gym as more zone 4, zone 5. So I still had at least one day of high intensity in there. So my second one was more at zone 3, and then I was doing 3 runs. My runs were an interval run, a tempo run, which is zone 3 to 4, and then a long steady run, which I tried to keep as low as possible. It's hard to run in zone 2, but I can do it now. But it was more zone 2 to 3 for me. But it's funny because everywhere I've been reading about hybrid training and training with strength and running at the same time, everywhere seems to be recommending a much shorter build phase and then having like more frequent deload weeks. That advice I ignored completely and I shouldn't have done. And another criticism of CrossFit is they don't often incorporate deloads. I know it's hard to do in class programming, but it's really something that a lot of us do need in order to recover and for your body to actually adapt. In my functional training sessions, I haven't been doing a huge amount of strength training to get stronger. I've just been doing maintenance stuff and maintenance of the movement. So I've been doing heavy sled push and pulls. I've been doing lunges with the race weight sandbag. I've been doing the farmer's carries and other things that fit within those Hyrox movements. I haven't been doing heavy back squats or heavy deadlifts or Olympic lifts or anything like that. And that's because I know that my body will hang on to the substantial amount of strength that I actually have for quite a long time. A couple of months ago, I cleaned 95 kilos, so I know I've still got a lot of strength. I can also back squat like 155 kilos still. And that is not strength that I need for Hyrox, so I was happy to lose it. And I definitely feel like I am getting weaker, but that is okay. This is literally me after 6 to 7 weeks of a savage build phase. And what I find hilarious is people online that don't like me say that I'm soft, which I find a compliment because I've spent so long trying to not be so hard on myself, pushing myself so ridiculously hard, having such high expectations of myself. I've worked a lot to be soft and I'm definitely not there yet because I was still in this mindset of punishing myself and pushing myself even though my body was screaming at me to slow down. And one of my major issues is that I struggle so much with rest and then I don't want to slow down. I want to push hard all the time and it's been so challenging to reduce my intensity. Now I'm in my taper week, I've started to do more, so reducing the volume by 60% at the moment, but I'm still doing some high intensity stuff because that is important. So I've been doing interval runs, fast interval runs, and they were fast for me. The times were so fast. I think it was like between 2 and 4 minutes off my pace. 2 and 4 minutes off my 5k pace, which is insane. And this is just a sign that I've maintained my anaerobic capacity. They were 2-minute intervals and I found them easy and it was easy for me to go quick. which absolutely shocked me. Unfortunately, I don't need that kind of speed for Hyrox because I will do exactly what I did last time and burn out and die, but it's good to know that it's there. And then disaster struck and my hamstring started to twinge, and this is because I'd pushed it way too far doing a build phase that's way longer than recommended. I just didn't want to break again after Christmas, and now I've got a twingy hamstring, so I can't run this week. But the great thing is you can't really lose massive amounts of fitness over 7 to 14 days, so I'm just going to do some high intensity bits here and there where I can that don't involve my hamstring and hope that I'm fresh for race day. I've really enjoyed training for Hyrox. I definitely want to continue having more aerobic work within my training schedule. I'm going to reevaluate everything after I've done the race and see what I want to do next. But it's really interesting seeing a lot of the CrossFit space reevaluating their relationship with constant high intensity training and seeing the benefits of more aerobic work. The next update will be my Hyrox video. I can't wait. Part of my Hyrox journey was running a couch to 5k. If you'd like to hear about that journey, then watch this video next. I literally hated running when I started and now I love it. Thank you for watching and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.